You know what I love about Kelsey? My boyfriend said, raising his beer bottle toward the crowd. She knows her place. She understands she's replaceable. The words landed like stones in my chest. Laughter erupted around the living room. Someone in the back actually whistled. I stood near the kitchen doorway, still holding the bowl of chips I'd just refilled, watching Evan's arm settle comfortably around a brunette I'd never seen before. She leaned into him like she'd been there all along, like I was already erased. My fingers tightened around the glass bowl. I waited for my face to flush, for tears to come, for anger to rise up and make me do something dramatic. None of that happened. Instead, something cold and clear settled over me. Smiled. Slow and deliberate. Almost friendly. That smile seemed to confuse him more than shouting ever could have. His grin faltered for just a second before he turned back to his audience. But I saw it. That flicker of uncertainty. That brief moment where he didn't know what I was thinking. But let him wonder. My name is Kelsey Donahue. I was 32 years old and I'd been with Evan for 3 years and 8 months. Nearly 4 years of my life spent building something I thought was permanent. 4 years of learning too late that confidence without kindness is just cruelty wearing a nice smile. I met Evan at a friend's wedding in Portland. He was charming and quick-witted, the kind of person who made you feel like the most interesting person in the room when he talked to you. He pursued me with focus and intention. Within 6 months, I'd moved into his downtown apartment. Within a year, we were talking about marriage timelines and baby names. I rearranged my entire world to fit into his. Changed my work schedule to match his. Gave up my Thursday painting class because he said it took time away from us. Stopped seeing certain friends because he found them annoying. Small compromises that felt reasonable at the time. Looking back now, I can see how carefully he'd been building a version of me that served him. But back then I thought I was in love. I thought we were building something together. The changes started about 8 months ago, though I didn't recognize them as warning signs then. Compliments turned into backhanded jokes. Jokes turned into casual comparisons. "You're great, babe," he'd say while scrolling through his phone. But some women just have more. I don't know. Energy. Spontaneity. I'd laugh it off. Tell myself he was just being honest. That relationships needed honesty to survive. I didn't realize I was being slowly conditioned to accept less. Being taught to feel grateful for scraps of affection. Being groomed to believe that my value was negotiable. He started commenting on other women more openly. Not in a crude way that I could call out, but in a way that made his message clear. "She takes care of herself," he'd say about a woman at the gym. I respect that dedication. The implication hung in the air between us. I wasn't dedicated enough. I wasn't trying hard enough. I was slowly becoming insufficient. I started working out more. Wearing the clothes he complimented. Laughing at jokes I didn't find funny. Still, it wasn't enough. The first concrete lie came on a Tuesday in March. Evan said he had to work late on a presentation. His firm was pitching a new client and everyone was staying until 9. At 8:15, my friend Tabitha posted a photo from a downtown bar. There was Evan in the background, his arm around someone's shoulders. The caption read, "Industry Mixer. So fun catching up with everyone." I stared at that photo for 20 minutes, zooming in, analyzing every detail. The woman he was with had dark hair and wore a red dress. She was laughing at something he'd said. His body language was relaxed, familiar. This wasn't the first time they'd been together. When Evan came home at 10, I said nothing. I smiled when he kissed my forehead. Listened to him complain about the difficult presentation. Asked if he wanted me to heat up the dinner I'd saved for him. He ate it while scrolling through his phone. He never once looked guilty. That's when I knew for certain. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. I stopped confronting him about small things. Stopped asking questions I already knew the answers to. Instead, I started watching. Really watching. The patterns became obvious once I looked for them. The way he angled his phone away when texting. How he'd started showering immediately when he got home, even on days when he supposedly just sat at a desk. The new cologne that appeared in the bathroom. The sudden interest in weekend plans that didn't include me. "I think I need some space this Saturday," he'd say casually. "The guys want to do a hiking thing." But his hiking boots stayed clean. His activity tracker showed he'd been in the city all day. When I checked our shared banking app later, there was a charge from a restaurant I'd been asking to try for months. He told me it was too expensive. Apparently not too expensive for whoever he'd taken there instead. I didn't say anything. I just added it to the mental list I was keeping. Evidence without accusation. Facts without confrontation. The woman from the party, the brunette he'd been draped over, started appearing more frequently in his life. Her name was Paige. She worked in marketing at a company his firm sometimes collaborated with. Evan mentioned her casually at first. "Paige has some interesting ideas about the campaign," he'd say over dinner. "Really sharp. Great instincts." Then the mentions increased. "Paige thinks we should try that new sushi place downtown." Paige was saying how she travels solo to Europe every year. Paige runs marathons. Each comment felt like a small cut. Death by 1,000 comparisons. He was replacing me in his mind before he'd even officially ended things. Testing out my successor while I was still there. Treating our relationship like a job he was preparing to quit. Training his replacement while I watched. Paige started showing up at his work events. Group dinners that I was suddenly not invited to. "It's just a work thing," he'd explain. "You'd be bored." But then photos would surface online. Paige was always there. Always next to Evan. Always laughing. At a rooftop party in late April, Evan made his intentions crystal clear. We'd arrived together, but he spent the entire evening across the room, telling stories to a circle of people that included Paige. I watched from the kitchen, helping the hosts set out food. "So I told Kelsey," Evan announced loud enough to carry. "Relationships are about options. About keeping your standards high. About not settling just because someone's convenient." Paige touched his arm when she laughed. Several people glanced toward me to gauge my reaction. I smiled and continued arranging cheese on a platter. Let them wonder. Let them think I hadn't heard or didn't care. But inside something fundamental shifted. That was the moment I stopped loving him. Not because of what he said, but because of how much he enjoyed humiliating me. How much pleasure he took in making me small in front of people we knew. Men like Evan don't respect confrontation. They expect it. They're prepared for it. They thrive on the drama of it. What they can't handle is indifference. I started pulling back emotionally. Not in obvious ways that would give him ammunition to use against me. But in small, deliberate steps. I stopped initiating conversations about our future. When he talked about plans, I responded with maybe or we'll see instead of enthusiastic agreement. I stopped cooking elaborate meals. Stopped waiting up for him when he came home late. Stopped reaching for him in bed. At first, he didn't notice. He was too occupied with whatever he was building with Paige. But gradually, my absence started registering. "You seem distant lately," he said one night, looking up from his phone with something like concern. Or maybe it was just annoyance that I wasn't performing my role correctly anymore. "Do I?" Kept my voice neutral. Pleasant even. "I haven't noticed." That answer unsettled him. He'd expected me to apologize or explain. To reassure him that everything was fine. Instead, I went back to reading my book. Left him sitting there with his own confusion. The power dynamic was shifting and he could feel it. Paige started posting photos that didn't quite include Evan's face but showed enough for me to recognize his apartment. His furniture. His distinctive art collection. The ceramic dog figurine his mother had given him. One photo showed a breakfast spread on his kitchen counter. Another showed someone's legs, masculine legs, stretched out on his couch. The captions were deliberately vague. "Perfect Sunday morning," and "finally found someone who gets me." She knew I could see them. This was intentional. A declaration of victory. She thought she'd won something valuable. She didn't realize yet that Evan wasn't a prize. He was a lesson I'd already learned. Meanwhile, Evan still came home to me most nights. Still used my shampoo when his ran out. Still expected me to schedule his dental appointments and remember his mother's birthday. He was living two lives and genuinely believing he was clever enough to maintain both indefinitely. That's the thing about people like Evan. They believe their own performance. They think charm is the same thing as character. He started getting sloppy with his stories. Told me he was having dinner with his brother on a Tuesday, but his brother called the apartment looking for him that same night. Claimed he was at the gym when I could hear bar noise in the background of his phone call. Said he was working late on a Friday but posted a photo from a baseball game an hour later before quickly deleting it. The contradictions piled up. I didn't point them out. I just filed them away, watching the web of lies grow more tangled. Our friends started noticing too. Not because I complained. I never said a word against him publicly. But because Evan himself was becoming obvious. The way he talked about Paige. The way he disappeared during group outings to text someone. The way his attention was always elsewhere. Is everything okay with you too? My friend Nina asked me quietly at a barbecue. Evan seems different. He's figuring some things out, I said calmly. We're giving each other space. Nina studied my face, trying to read what I wasn't saying. But I'd gotten good at keeping my expression neutral, at seeming fine when I was actually just waiting. At another party, this one for Evan's co-worker's promotion. He did it again. Made me the punchline of a joke I hadn't agreed to be part of. The thing about Kelsey, he announced to a group near the drinks table, is she's comfortable. But comfortable isn't the same as exciting, you know. Few people laughed uncertainly. Others looked uncomfortable. Paige, standing next to him, didn't laugh at all this time. She looked at me with something that might have been pity, or guilt, or the first stirring of doubt. I met her gaze steadily, smiled slightly, then walked away to help carry food from the kitchen. Let them both sit with that moment. Let them wonder what I was thinking. Let the uncertainty do the work for me. Because here's what I'd learned. Silence is powerful. When you stop defending yourself, stop explaining yourself, stop trying to control how others see you, something interesting happens. People start paying closer attention. They start questioning the narrative they'd been told. 3 days after that party, Paige sent me a message. Not hostile or defensive. Just confused. Hey, it read. I think we should talk. Something doesn't add up. I didn't respond immediately. I let her sit with her doubts for a full day. Let her questions multiply. Let her start pulling at the threads of Evan's stories on her own. When I finally replied, I kept it simple. I'm around if you want to meet for coffee. We met at a cafe downtown on a Wednesday afternoon. Paige arrived first, already seated in a corner booth when I walked in. She looked younger than I'd expected. Not naive exactly, but not as worldly as she'd seemed from a distance. Thank you for meeting me, she said as I sat down. Her coffee cup was already empty. She'd been sitting there a while, working up her courage. Of course, I said simply. Then I waited. Let her lead this conversation. Let her ask the questions she'd come here to ask. How long have you and Evan been together? Paige asked, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Almost 4 years, I said calmly. We lived together downtown. The apartment with the brick walls and the tall windows. The one with his mother's ceramic dog on the shelf. I watched recognition flash across her face. She'd been there. Recently. Probably thought it was his apartment. His space alone. The idea that I'd been there the whole time clearly hadn't occurred to her. He told me you two were basically over, she said quietly. That you were just roommates at this point. That you were seeing other people. Did he? It wasn't a question. I kept my voice even. Not angry, not hurt. Just factual. Paige pulled out her phone. Started scrolling. He's been staying at my place most weekends for the last 6 weeks. He talks about moving in together. About meeting my parents at Christmas. I nodded slowly. What nights does he usually stay with you? Fridays and Saturdays mostly. Sometimes Thursdays. He comes home to me those nights, I said simply. Usually around 2 or 3 in the morning. Sometimes he showers first. Sometimes he doesn't. The color drained from Paige's face. We compared timelines after that. Dates he'd told her he was working late, matched nights he'd told me he was with his brother. Weekends he'd told her about visiting his parents were weekends he'd actually been with me at my family's lake house. Business trips he'd mentioned to her were actually just regular weeks at home with me. The architecture of his lies became clear when we laid them out together. He hadn't just been lying to both of us. He'd been crafting 2 completely separate realities, each detailed enough to be believable on its own. I feel so stupid, Paige said, her voice breaking slightly. All those red flags I ignored. The way he'd suddenly end phone calls. How he never wanted me to post photos with his face visible. The fact that he never gave me a key to his place. You're not stupid, I told her and meant it. He's just had a lot of practice at this. She looked at me, then really looked at me, searching for something. Why are you being so nice to me? I tried to take your boyfriend. You didn't try to take anything, I said. He handed himself to you. There's a difference. Paige wanted to confront him immediately. Storm over to his office. Make a scene. Demand explanations. I understood the impulse. But I suggested something different. He expects confrontation, I said. He's prepared for it. He'll have explanations ready. He'll make you feel crazy for doubting him. That's what people like Evan do. Then what do we do? Paige asked, frustration evident in her voice. We let him unravel himself, I said simply. We stop holding up our ends of his lies. We stop covering for him. We just step back. I could see her processing this. The desire for immediate justice warring with the logic of my approach. How long? She finally asked. Not long, I assured her. Men like Evan can't maintain control once they realize they've lost it. They panic. They make mistakes. Big ones. She nodded slowly. Okay. What do you need me to do? Just stop being available, I said. Stop answering his texts right away. Stop rearranging your schedule for him. Let him feel the shift. We exchanged phone numbers before leaving. United by the realization that we'd both been played by the same person. The changes started within days. Evan noticed Paige pulling back before he noticed me doing the same thing. She'd been the new, exciting thing. Suddenly that excitement was cooling and he didn't know why. He came home Thursday night in a mood I recognized. Agitated. Off balance. Women are so confusing, he muttered, scrolling through his phone with increasing frustration. You think everything's great and then suddenly they're being distant for no reason. That sounds frustrating, I said neutrally, not looking up from my laptop. I was working on a project for my job, something I'd been neglecting while managing Evan's needs and emotions. He glanced at me, seeming to really see me for the first time in weeks. You'd tell me if something was wrong, right? Would you want me to? I asked, keeping my tone genuinely curious rather than accusatory. The question hung in the air between us. He didn't have a good answer for it. Instead he grabbed his keys. I'm going out for a while. Okay, I said simply. Didn't ask where. Didn't ask when he'd be back. That clearly bothered him more than questions would have. Paige told me he showed up at her apartment that night. Unannounced. Something he'd never done before because he'd always been careful about maintaining boundaries that protected his lies. You've been weird lately, he'd said according to the text she sent me. What's going on? She told him she'd been busy with work. Stressed about a project deadline. Nothing to do with him. Her tone was light, unconcerned. The same tone I'd been using with him for weeks. He tried to stay to talk things through, but she said she was tired. Had an early morning. Maybe they could catch up this weekend. Maybe. Not definitely. Not with enthusiasm. He left confused. Paige texted me a thumbs up after he was gone. This is harder than I expected, she wrote. I want to yell at him so badly. Soon, I replied. Let him sweat a little first. The satisfaction of watching someone squirm when they're used to being in control cannot be overstated. Evan had spent months making me feel uncertain and off balance. Now it was his turn. By the following week, Evan was spiraling. Both his carefully constructed relationships were cooling simultaneously, and he couldn't figure out why. He tried being extra charming at home, bringing me flowers for the first time in 6 months, making dinner reservations at expensive places. I feel like we've been distant, he said over linguine at an Italian restaurant downtown. I want to fix that. Do you? I asked, meeting his eyes steadily. No malice in my voice. Just genuine curiosity. Of course, he insisted. You're important to me, Kelsey. I know I haven't always shown it, but you are. What changed? Yes. Why now? He fumbled for an answer. I realized I've been taking you for granted. That needs to change. Translation. His backup plan was pulling away and he was panicking. He needed to secure home base while he figured out what went wrong with Paige. That's nice to hear, I said non-committally. Then changed the subject to something neutral. Work. The weather. Anything but us. He tried to steer the conversation back to our relationship several times. Each time I deflected gently, pleasantly, but firmly. On Saturday, Evan suggested we have people over. Casual gathering. Friends and drinks. The kind of party where he typically performed, held court, reminded everyone how charismatic and beloved he was. I agreed. Started making arrangements. Sent invitations. Prepared food. Paige was on the guest list because she was part of his work circle, and excluding her would have raised questions. She confirmed she'd attend. Evan looked pleased with himself, probably imagining he could navigate both of us in the same space. The night of the party, our apartment filled with the usual crowd. Evan immediately moved into host mode, telling stories, making drinks, collecting attention. I noticed how often his eyes tracked Paige across the room. How he maneuvered to be near her. How he tried to recreate the dynamic they'd had before. But Paige wasn't playing along. She was friendly but distant. Talked to other people. Laughed at other people's jokes. When Evan told one of his rehearsed anecdotes, she barely smiled. I watched confusion flicker across his face. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Around 10, Evan tried to make one of his characteristic jokes at my expense. The kind he'd been making for months, training our friends to see me as the lesser partner in our relationship. The thing about Kelsey, he started, his tone already condescending, is she's comfortable with being comfortable. No real ambition beyond her little routine. But this time the laughter didn't come. People exchanged uncomfortable glances. Someone coughed. Nina changed the subject deliberately, steering the conversation away from his attempted humiliation. Evan looked around, confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere. These jokes used to land. People used to laugh. What changed? What changed was that I'd stopped participating in my own diminishment. I'd stopped laughing along, stopped making self-deprecating comments to ease the tension, stopped performing the role of the good-natured girlfriend who could take a joke. Without my cooperation, his cruelty just looked like cruelty. Paige caught my eye from across the room. She nodded slightly, understanding passing between us. The party wound down around midnight. After the last guests left, Evan was quiet, pensive. He poured himself a drink and sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone with increasing agitation. That was a weird night, he finally said. Did something happen? Did I miss something? Like what? I asked, cleaning up dishes in the kitchen. People were acting strange. Paige barely talked to me. You seemed, I don't know, different. Different how? Kept my voice level. Mildly interested. Distant. Cold. He set his phone down. Are you seeing someone else? The accusation was almost funny. Projection at its finest. No, Evan. I'm not seeing anyone else. Then what is it? His voice had an edge now. Frustration bleeding through. I dried my hands on a dish towel and turned to face him. What do you think it is? He stood up, agitated now. Don't play games with me, Kelsey. If you have something to say, just say it. I don't have anything to say. And that was true. I was done explaining myself to him. Done defending my worth. Done participating in a relationship that had ended months ago. Sunday morning, Evan left early. Said he had errands to run. I knew he was going to see Paige. Trying to figure out what had shifted. Trying to regain control of a situation that was slipping away from him. She texted me an hour later. He's here. Wants to know why I've been distant. Should I tell him? Your call, I replied. But maybe ask him why he lied about us. 20 minutes later, she sent another message. I did it. Asked him directly. He's denying everything. Says you're exaggerating. That you're just jealous and making things up. Are you recording this? Yes. Already on it. Smart woman. Whatever happened next, there would be proof. Evidence that couldn't be spun or reframed or explained away with charm. An hour passed. Then Paige called me. Can you come over? I think you should be here for this. I grabbed my keys. On my way to the confrontation I'd been avoiding for months. Not because I was afraid of it, but because I'd been waiting for the right moment. When he couldn't control the narrative. When the truth was obvious to everyone. That moment had arrived. When I arrived at Paige's apartment, Evan was sitting on her couch looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The charm was gone. The confidence had evaporated. He looked up when I walked in and whatever words he'd been preparing died on his lips. Kelsey, he started. This isn't what it looks like. What does it look like? I asked calmly, taking a seat across from him. Paige sat next to me. United front. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. I can explain. Then explain, Paige said. Her voice was steady but I could hear the anger underneath. Explain why you told me Kelsey was just a roommate. Explain why you were planning to move in with me while living with her. Explain which one of us you were lying to. Or was it both? It's complicated, he said weakly. The default excuse of people caught in their own web. It's actually pretty simple, I said. You wanted both of us. You thought you were clever enough to maintain both relationships. You thought we'd never compare notes. His face flushed. You two talked. You went behind my back. Paige laughed. Actually laughed. We went behind your back. That's what you're upset about. You had no right, he started, his voice rising. We had every right, I cut him off. Every right to talk to each other. Every right to compare stories. Every right to figure out we were being played. The confrontation didn't last long after that. Evan tried several different approaches. Anger, indignation, wounded pride, attempts at manipulation. None of them worked. Paige and I had already aligned. Already compared every detail. Already knew the full scope of his deception. I think you should leave, Paige told him eventually. And lose my number. This is crazy, he said, looking between us like we were the unreasonable ones. You're both overreacting. Sure, I said flatly. We're overreacting to months of deliberate lies. That makes sense. He grabbed his jacket. You'll regret this, Kelsey. Both of you will. I'm not the bad guy here. You're exactly the bad guy here, Paige said. The only question is how long it takes you to figure that out. After he left, Paige and I sat in silence for several minutes, processing, decompressing. What now? She finally asked. Now we move on, I said simply. We don't engage. We don't respond to his attempts to explain or apologize or win us back. We just close that door and walk away. She nodded. Thank you for not hating me. I never hated you, I told her honestly. You weren't the problem. He was. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment across town. Smaller than the place I'd shared with Evan but entirely mine. No ghost. No bad memories. Just space to rebuild myself. Nina had helped me move out while Evan was at work. I didn't leave a note. Didn't explain where I was going. Just took my things and disappeared from his life the way he'd been trying to erase me from his. He tried reaching out. Multiple calls and texts I never answered. Emails explaining how he'd made a mistake. How he wanted another chance. How he realized now what he'd lost. I deleted them all without responding. He didn't deserve my anger or my forgiveness. He didn't deserve access to my emotional energy anymore. Paige had moved on too. Started dating someone who actually valued her. Someone who didn't keep her hidden or treat her like a secret. We still texted occasionally. A friendship forged in strange circumstances but genuine nonetheless. As for Evan, I heard through mutual friends that he struggled to adjust. That his reputation had taken a hit when people learned what he'd done. That relationships he'd taken for granted had evaporated when his character became clear. He'd called me replaceable. But the truth was simpler than that. I wasn't replaceable. I just finally realized that staying with him was beneath my worth. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply walk away.